Boop, boop, boo. Doody-boo. All right. Hopefully people can hear me out there. Hello, hello. There is quite... Ooh, turn off the speakers. There's a bit of a delay between the chat and what you're seeing. So there's about a minute delay. So if I'm not really quick on response, it's because you're watching me in the future. Now you can watch me right here. Hopefully this is showing up. Yeah, okay, people can hear me. Awesome, solid. Hopefully people can also see me. Where are folks from? Welcome. Hello, hello India. Hello Brazil. All right. Oh, Guyana. Awesome. I've been there once. Colombia, Honduras. Awesome. Hey, everybody. Welcome to a thrilling live stream here on the E.C. Abrams tutorial channel, where we try to teach people about After Effects, motion graphics, all that fun stuff. And today, the topic we'll be covering is London's sad face. Hey, life can't be so bad in London, all right? Say hello from Italy. Don't know what Italian for hello is. So yeah, in this live stream, we're going to talk about expressions. Expressions, I'm sure a lot of you know, are the very esoteric, very unpleasant, very intimidating part of After Effects where you type things out, type, and things are supposed to happen, and often they don't. So I know that this is a very frustrating part of After Effects for a lot of people, and hopefully we can make that less frustrating. So we may not get into... Oh, someone's from the faraway land of Quebec. Oh, man, thanks for coming out. So yeah, it's... expressions are hard, but hopefully we can give you guys a good start, answer some questions about, whatever troubles you about expressions, and hopefully you can get them to work for you rather than hitting your head against the wall. So I guess we'll start it off. If you have any kind of questions about them, and we'll see what we can get to. One of the earlier questions that was in the chat here was, how do I even start learning? I don't know anything about programming. I don't know anything about coding. I got great news for you. I don't know anything about programming. I guess I know the basics of programming in as much as when you arrange blocks of ideas next to each other, it creates a sequence and then the program runs, right? So that's sort of the basic thing about programming, is that you're setting up a sequence of commands and then a thing runs. The difficulty with expressions is that we don't totally know. This has been... I don't know what to do with a lot of this stuff. So yeah, and we'll see what we can do. So how do we know all of the options we can use in expressions? What are the limits of the expression sandbox we have to plan? Well, Damon, longtime friend of the channel, thanks for coming out. So how do we know what all we could do with expressions? Well, there are a few basic places to look. One place you should definitely look is the Adobe help file about expressions. That's a great spot to sort of start your understanding of expressions in general. So expressions are a language. So that's the first thing I guess we should talk about. What are expressions? What are we supposed to do with them, right? And expressions are, in effect, a language that you're using to talk to After Effects or to describe a relationship in After Effects. So I guess we might as well sort of talk about what things we can do, and we'll see what we can do. So let's go into After Effects, and I want to really quickly go over the basics, and then we'll talk about where we can go from there. So then I go to a control panel, and I kick us over to the desktop. So Expressions describe relationships between things. So when you're asking what are all the things we might use, well, anything that is a property we can use. Any property within After Effects is something we can link to. So I'll show you what I mean about that. So we can open up a composition. None of it matters, but we can make, a new... Let's make a new sort of shape layer, maybe. Let's make a square here. I like to use a nice big bright square so people can see it, and hopefully the streaming is good. So we could write in something about this, and we could really link so many things together. But just in general, if we have, say, two squares, and I want to sort of describe a relationship. So let's say we call up the scale and call up the position. I can say, well, the scale should be equal to the position of this other layer. You can definitely do that so that the position of one thing changes the scale of the other. That's a horrible example, but you can do it. So an expression is always generally, I shouldn't say always, but it's always describing what the property will become, right? So we could say, well, we would like the scale here. We should make the scale, well, maybe we could just make the scale like 50, 50, right? That's describing what the scale is. There we go, in square brackets. So we're literally just saying, you are now this, right? And that's it. What is the scale? The scale is 50, 50. So that's fine. Well, what else could it be? Well, the scale could also be time, time. That could be what it is. Now, time and time are not numbers. They're properties. So time is the time in seconds that it is. So here at 30 seconds, time, time would mean 30, 30, right? And so it makes this very unexciting, growing, right? We can also use math. So we could say, well, here's a property, and we can times it by, 10. So we can do that. So it's going more out this way, and that's happening. So at its most basic, an expression is just a way of describing what that property will be. So to Damon's question about what can we use in the description, we can use pretty much anything that you can see. So anything that is a property, anything that is a property is something that has numbers. So all of these things, this is a property, that's a property, size, position, roundness, property, everything properties, right? These are all properties. The other things that you can deal with, and here's a fun little menu that maybe people don't open. You can just click this little triangle right here. And this triangle here will open up a bunch of things, and we can just, look at all these things. Look at these crazy things. So these are all also properties, right? These are also properties. So the name of a composition is a property. The name of footage, the time, all these things are things you can put in. But some of them are not properties. Some of them are functions. So we've got properties, we've got functions. So think of properties like an object or like a noun. So I often think about expressions like a language, right? So when you're looking at a language, you have nouns, you have verbs, you have adjectives, you have adverbs, all this stuff. Or I hope people know that. I don't know if that's true or not. But in this case, we have nouns, in which case properties, and then we have things that happen to the properties. So that's what we've got going on. So we can combine this language to make stuff. So that's hopefully useful. What do we got going on in the chat here? Hopefully that kind of explains the basics of expressions, how we know what all we can do. How do we know what what exactly works, or what exactly we could type in, or what exactly we might describe or say to the program. Well, a lot of that is kind of hidden, but it's not hidden too far, because you can just call it up at, let's see, here we go to Adobe expression reference. I'm just going to call up real quick. There's a wonderful address that I think everyone should know. It is the Adobe Expression Language Reference. This is a place that explains fairly well what are we covering exponents? I don't really know what that means. But let's get into the Expression Language Reference, and we can see like this property, this layer, and a little paragraph to describe what these things are. They're very, very nicely laid out. There are some things that are conspicuously missing in here, but this gives a lot of ideas that we could be doing. So let's keep that around in case we have to look at it and get into some stuff. So let's go back to the chat and see what questions are coming up for people. What is coming up in the old chat window here? What's going on? Andrew, good to see you back for another live session. What expressions do you use most regularly, and which ones do you find most helpful? That's tough to say, because usually we have usually what we would do is we would have, for me anyway, I'm using expressions to kind of solve problems. So in that way, usually the if-then is usually something I'm using a lot, because I'm using a conditional. I want to sort of fix something, or I want to automate something that I otherwise am not interested in. So if there's something that would take way too much manual labor, I'm trying to automate it, usually with an if-then type of expression, if that makes sense. So it's sort of the thing that I use the most. I use just some of the properties I use most are time as a kind of driver for most things. But generally, I'm just doing math. It's usually just math. How to use keyframes in an expression. Well, this is a fun one. Mayor Gordon? I'm going to assume that's pronounced Mayor. And how do we use keyframes in an expression? Okay, so the relationship between keyframes and expressions can sometimes be a little bit tricky, right? Which one is happening first? What affects the other? And let's go to a really quick example so we can see, hopefully firsthand, how the two things relate to each other, right? So we'll just kick it back to the screen. Boop. So let's make a composition, keys plus expressions. So let's say, for example, I was going to make this wonderful circle. I've made a circle, good for me. And on the position of this thing, I'm going to put an expression. I'm sure an expression all of you have used in some point. It is the wiggle expression, the wiggle. And then in brackets of the wiggle, you would say, well, maybe you should wiggle like 10 times a second, comma, 100. So it's like wiggling all over the place, right? Look at it go, wiggling, wiggling, wiggling. I can also add keyframes to this position. Add a keyframe here, add a keyframe here, move it over here, move it over here, right? So now, whoa, as you can see, it is going along those keyframes. So the keyframes are happening, and the wiggle is also happening, right? So those two things are working at the same time. So the wiggle is being applied to the keyframe information, right? So you can kind of see the keyframe information. Look here where the position is red. So it's red because that's telling us an expression is acting on it. And when I click on it, so it's like 1491. When I click on it, it says 1488. Well, 1488 is what things would be if we didn't have the wiggle expression on. But we turn it on, and now that is happening to the data that is on the keyframe. So the keyframe is describing, just like an expression describes, where or what the property value will be at a certain time, and then the expression happens to it. All right. If we were to, let's say it didn't say wiggle. Let's say instead it said, I don't know, like we said in the beginning, like 960, 540. So now, even though we have the keyframes aren't happening because after the keyframes, we then apply the expression, and the expression says, well, your value is always 960, 540, right? So because of the nature of what we've written in the line, we're sort of overriding because, well, we're going to be a keyframe. Okay, good. Well, now here's the expression coming in to get you. Thanks for bringing the keyframe in early. Here's an expression to just overwrite what you're saying. All right. Here's something else that's fun. Value. Here's a word that can be very helpful when you're working with keyframes and expressions. So value, if you just type in value, then it's just going to be what it is. Value just means value of this thing. It is what it is. It just give me the thing that it is. Because then I can say value plus, and then I can say value plus, and then in a couple of square brackets, 50, 50, right? So it'll always be what the value is, and then adding 50 on either axis, right? So I can do that. And then if I turn the expression off and on, you can see it jumps. Well, it's not very extreme. Let me do this. Okay. So, boop, boop, boop. Let's see here. So according to the keyframes, it should be going wee up and then down. But according to this expression, once you've got the value, now add 500 to each thing. So you're adding the value to this. Now you could do just about anything here. You could start with the value and then go somewhere else. Or you could alter the value in some way. But the value is what the property is as determined by what you've typed in, what keyframes you have set. So hopefully that kind of gives you a little insight into what you can do with existing data. So when you want to access what the keyframe kind of is, then you can do that. What else is fun? I'm trying to think how we would combine two things. Sometimes you can have things that are conflicting, so you just have to be aware to not cause conflict, obviously. But hopefully that gets through that. So what is up in the chat? Let's kick it back to the chat and keep going through some questions. Let's see. Where can I learn all the expressions? You want to learn all of them, eh? Every and all expression, eh? Open the image file doesn't exist. Yeah, MotionScript is a great website. I read that stuff all the time. Any articles by Dan Eberts, you should read those. He does a great job of really explaining the programming behind stuff. Another question about what the most useful expressions I've ever used. So I often use, for example, the if-then or the if-else function. A lot of the time I'm using, I use sometimes the smoother. Smooth is sometimes useful. I'm more often than not kind of using expressions to either control or alter things. Do you work for some expression to make for your team or for yourself? Do I work on some expression to make AE script? Boop, boop, boop. Any advice about working with expressions as they relate to third-party plugins? DUIK / things to avoid when you do. So a lot of third-party plugins will generate a lot of expressions for you, right? So one that I work with, I like using Rubber Hose. Rubber Hose is something that no, we can talk about sliders. We'll probably sliders coming up next. So when editing, for example, expressions you find, either you're copying and pasting them from Creative Cow, which I do a lot, or what you're doing is you're tampering with someone's machine, right? Someone's created a beautiful machine, and you're coming in and you're like, well, let's just why would I just jam a wrench in there? So without sort of having intimate knowledge of what the things are and why they're doing what they're doing, you can cause more harm than good. But thankfully, a lot of these places have, I think DUIK has a very exhaustive amount of documentation. So what I would say is it's a better move. Understand, why am I tampering with these third-party expressions that someone has purpose made for specific reasons? Why am I doing that? And try to, if you need deeper understanding, always go to the documentation and see if they describe what's up. DUIK especially, because they do have some pretty wacky stuff going on in there. So it can be intimidating. But the great thing about most third-party plugins is that they're designed to be real lowest common denominator, sort of very useful things. So there's usually an end point or a control point. If you're just applying things to that end point, that control point. So for example, in Rubber Hose, if we are doing things to the nice little target handles, shouldn't break anything, right? We're just grabbing onto that handle and moving it around. That's totally fine. But if you're like, well, how about I just go type, and then you can definitely cause breakages. So I would really recommend, don't open up the hood unless you want to learn how a car works. You know, like I don't go in and take a wrench to my timing belt unless I really want to spend some time to learn about that kind of thing. How do you combine third-party plugins with normal expressions that affect the rest of the comp? Well, I don't know. It's kind of an abstract idea. Like I don't see them as competing ideas. So is the sort of thing like what things specifically would you be combining that would cause troubles, right? Generally, you want to, in the DUIK example, be pre-composing things because it's used for character stuff. It'd be animate a character on a loop or something. Yeah. So if you've got a character on a loop, wonderful loop, you would then put that in a pre-comp of some kind, and then set it to loop. If you want to loop it, you can just loop its time, right? You just go to its time remapping and make that loop, right? So that I think that would be the best solution to that, because you've created a loop, great, and you're not messing around with too much stuff. So hopefully that makes sense. So where do you use Python in After Effects? I don't think so. I don't know. After Effects uses sort of a Java-based stuff. So hopefully that, in relation to background or something. Again, I'm not sure they're really conflicting, right? You put expressions on this layer, you put expressions on that layer. They don't need to bump into each other, right? I don't believe I've ever had sort of conflicts in that way. But things just aren't bumping into each other. All right, let's have a look. Is there a way to cache or bake randomness generated by a wiggle expression, for example? So David and Carlo, let's see. So there are a few sort of ways when you want to bake stuff, when you're talking about the wiggle expression specifically. The wiggle expression is based on the index number. So what you would need to do is then set the random seed. All right. So I guess now it's time to kick it on over to the After Effects. This is the time we go back to the desktop. All right. So let's say, make a new one of these. Composition, just so I can keep them straight, is baking. Yum, yum, yum. Baking. So let's say, for example, we had, and I'm just really terribly doing this. Bad, Evan. Just doing all sorts of bad things. All right, let's take this stroke off because it's really annoying me. All right. So let's say we've got this polygon here, and we are going to make its position do something. We're just going to make its position wiggle. Boop, boop. And then we're going to make it wiggle, once a second, 250, right? So it's wiggling around in this. I really cannot see what that is. There we go. This is better. So it's kind of moving around. Let's make it move around faster so we can really understand. So it's really moving around. Now, the question was, how do I bake this? Now, understandably, you would probably want this to remain consistent if, for example, you were then going to say, well, I'm going to duplicate it up. So now I've made another layer. So maybe this layer is, maybe it's a little bit lighter. Okay, let's duplicate again. Let's dance again. And then we've got an even lighter one. So let's say we got these three things and they're moving around in sort of random ways. Can't really see them too good. Scale them down a bit, scale them up a bit, whatever. So we've got these three things. If you start changing their layer order, notice that they're changing position. So I'm going to change the position of the dark one up here, and I'm going to put it at the bottom. Well, notice now it's in the position of the bottom one, right? So when we're talking about baking, we basically want these to behave no matter what layers we put in. I can start adding an adjustment layer. Oh, now they shifted. Now I'm going to add a null object. Oh, they shifted again. So common problem. All right. So what we can do, I believe, if I'm remembering correctly, we would go random seed, I think. Nope, that was not it. I have spelled it bad. Random seed. Oh, there's the problem. Seed random. Random number methods expressions. I think it's seed random. Set the offset. Yeah. So we go small seed random. There we go. So now the seed of this is always 5. So layer 3, always 5. So notice I'm shifting that layer around, and whatever I put in, usually it's the index number, so I just put it to 2. Now it's always locked. Seed random, I'm saying, hey, before we start get into anything else, the random seed for this entire expression is going to be this. It's going to be 2. I'm telling you it's 2. I'm not letting you, Mr. Wiggle, you can't just pick whatever number you want. I'm telling you it's 2. And so when you say, oh, it's 2, then it's always 2. No matter how many more layers we add in, notice the other ones are bouncing around, but this one is staying solid. So yeah, that's it. That is that. So hopefully that explains some stuff. There you go. Yeah. Not random seed random. As you can see, I make a whoopsie every now and again. Hopefully that makes sense. Okay. JavaScript based, not Java. Yeah, so it's based on JavaScript. And hopefully it's an object-based language. A lot of the grammar and syntax are exactly the same. As you concede. Oh, puns, Max. Wonderful puns. Loving the puns. So, how to disable expression but keep value it has in chosen frame. How to disable expression but keep value. Let's kick it back to the chat here real quick. Boop 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 boop. We'll go to Chat Town. So. Convert to RBG. How do you disable an expression but keep the value it has in the chosen frame? So I guess basically you've got, so I guess the idea is that you've got like something going on, and then you want basically at a certain frame, you want the thing to stop, right? It's like, oh, it's time for expression to stop, and then for it to just be at this point. It can be kind of complex. Turning an expression off and on, it's not usually very, how would I say this? It's not impossible, right? It just depends on what the expression is and what you're doing and why you're doing it, right? For example, index 30 in rotation, index times 30 in rotation, that wouldn't really change over time, right? Index times 30 would just be the number of the index multiplied by 30. So there would be no sort of change. If you want to be able to edit it, you would just type in like value plus index times 30, right? Because then the value of it still remains when you do stuff. So, Toon Boom or Animate CC, which is best? Well, that's not really. There you go. Yeah, convert expression to keyframes. That would bake, as we said. We're talking about baking on the last thing. That would really lock it in. Editing preloaded as preloaded. Hello, Naveen Kumar. How you doing? Yes, you can use the checkbox control and an if, Mayor. Excellent idea. So what Mayor is saying is that you could set it up so that, in one part of the if, it's like, well, then we're looking at this expression, and then if the checkbox is off, then we are not, right? So ABC123 is asking, what are you asking? Whether Toon Boom or Animate CC, which is best? They're different programs that do different things, so best is subjective. But today we're talking about expressions. Keep it expressions related for another half hour here. We got maybe my voice is really starting to go early today, so we'll see. We've discussed using audio with expressions to affect something like a shape, or is that something for another time? No, we can talk about that there, Jonathan. So. Working with audio, Jonathan Box asking about audio in After Effects. So, audio in After Effects, sometimes it feels like oil and water. They just do not want to mix, right? And making effects from expressions, don't know totally what to take. But let's get into this audio thing. So. Audio, if we were to import some audio, which don't totally know what to grab. What should I find? Somewhere in my Computron. It's got to be full of audio somewhere. I will spare you me searching for files here, hopefully. You know what I should have done is, loaded this stuff up earlier. And so we are going to be dealing with, okay, boop. So let me just switch over the screen here. And we are switching over to the old desktop. So Jonathan Box was asking about working with audio and using audio to drive things. So the most basic thing you want to do, you import your audio, you put it on your timeline, hit L a couple times and have a look at the waveform. This is basically what we're going to be... Oh, so full of burps. This is basically the data we have to work with. All right. What is the data? And the data is this waveform. Wonderful, nice-looking waveform. What we can do is we can convert audio... We can go to the keyframe assistant and we can convert audio to keyframes, right? So when we do that, when we make that happen, what we are doing is we are creating keyframes, in this case for the left channel, the right channel, and something that represents sort of the average between both channels, that is this waveform. So how do we know that those things look similar? Well, if if we have a look here, this is that waveform as replicated in audio in keyframes, right? So that's how it looks like this. That's how it looks other way around, right? So now we've got a data set that we can start to mess around with, start to apply things to. So, if you were to say, well, let's keep making these stupid polygons. Evan loves his dumb polygons. Let's say we were to call up this thing's scale and say, hey, scale, let's start by making a variable, and that variable is going to be both channels of this, right? Then you drop your semicolon. And then the output of this is going to be like x comma x. Let's do that. So because both channels are saying 10.5, this is now 10.5 comma 10.5, and look what it's doing. It's whoa. Now you can't hear it, but please just assume that the audio is playing and we're really enjoying that. All right. So that's something you might do. Now, we're talking about control of the audio, right? How do we control this stuff? Well, what we need is usually something like a linear. So let me just say y equals linear, and linear is, I think it goes x and then the bottom value and then the top value and then the new bottom value and the new top value, and then should definitely set a semicolon and boop, 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 boop. That should work. So using the linear, we are now remapping. We're remapping these ideas so that the range here of this scale, the range, is now always going to go from, say, 50 to 100, and we're remapping the values of 0 to 10. Right? Because if you look at the both channels slider, you can get an idea that it kind of peaks. Oh, it's got some real wacky peaks up here. We just want to kind of take advantage of that stuff. So does that answer the question about working with audio? Once you have the data in a way that you can work with, you generally do have to convert it, right? Even if we are using, for example, even if we're using sound keys, right? Trapcode sound keys. Boop, 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 boop. You know what you want to do? You want to apply sound keys to something more visual. Let's do that. So let's go up, new, solid, sure. Sound keys, burp. Sound keys. So I don't know if anyone out there has used sound keys before, but sound keys by Trapcode. Trapcode sound keys by Red Giant. You basically choose your audio layer and it starts to make, all these little bars and stuff. Well, what you're going to end up doing is setting sort of ranges, and you're just better able to dissect things. But at the end of the day, you are hitting apply and you are pooping out a bunch of keyframes. Again, you're just getting that keyframe output by massaging things a little bit differently. So, whether you use the sound keys, whether you're converting to audio keyframes, you got to get that audio into data. Now, there may be other plugins and expressions. I'm not typically working with audio in this way, and there are sort of effects that run on like audio amplitude and stuff like that that just observe the audio and poop it out visually for you. So those are a thing. But if you want to use an expression, you want to turn this audio into an expression driver, you are going to need to probably convert it in some way. So hopefully that makes sense, and my voice is getting real gross. So we are back to the chat. What's going on? Boop, 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 boo. Okay. All right, so making effects from expressions, like where you have a blank controller, slider control picker, blah, blah, in the effects panel. Oh no, it's getting pushed. That references an expression you have. Yeah, okay, I got you now. So Bartos's, how do you express yourself? Oh, Andrew, such jokes. So yeah, let's talk about let's talk about sort of the expression controls effects. There are a few of them. Where's my mouse? There are a few of them in the old effects controls. We got 3D point control, angle control, checkbox, color, layer, point, slider. These are ways to get numerical input into other things. And I think we're going to see a lot more use of them in combination with sort of the template making power of the essential graphics, because these are all beautiful things to just slot in there. So we'll see if we can make stuff with them. I think this is a good time to talk a little briefly about about how setting things up and using these controls can be very helpful to you. What are the best languages to learn for scripting? Well, JavaScript, yeah, extended script. HTML and CSS might be a little bit applicable, but yeah, it's generally just work in the languages that things are built with. Here we are. You turn expressions into a script. So scripts are generally written using the scripting language. I think there's a special panel. I don't write scripts myself because I also find programming to be sort of difficult. And I don't know, I've just gravitated more towards drawing things than I have to writing stuff. So let's mess around with some of these expression controls. Let's do stuff with the expression controls. Oh, I wish I brought more water to my desk, but instead I have a weird gnome mug. All right, we are back to the desktop. So I started a comp earlier here because I really wanted to talk about the if-then, and I wanted to talk about the if-else, and I wanted to talk about specifically the checkbox control because I find it so interesting. So I guess I could have put the checkbox control anywhere. But anyway, I've got this checkbox control. Now, you guys might not be familiar, but we have a lot of these expression controls effects: 3D point control, angle control, checkbox control, color control, layer control, point control, slider control. So these are just giving us inputs. So 3D point control is just holding a three-part, expression, an array of 3 parts. So that's fun. The angle control is just holding that wonderful angle. Goes around 1 times degrees, plus degrees, etc. We got a checkbox control, which is either 1 or 0. Those are its outputs. We've got a color control that is outputting, a color. And I believe the colors come out in 4-part arrays, I do believe. We've got a layer control where you're basically just picking a layer. And, you can choose the source, masks, and effects. This might actually be new. I think it is a new. Usually it's just this, but now it's also this. So you can choose a layer. You got that going on. We got a point control. Point control similar to the 3D point control, but 2-dimensional. Awesome. And the slider control. A number, an integer. I guess it could be, is it integer have decimal points? I don't know. But it can be anything. It can be like, I don't know, 2 point, right? It can be anything. But you can slide it around and do stuff. So think of the expression controls like inputs. Like these are like a series of, my voice, the series of buttons and knobs and stuff like that we can then use to control other things. So in this case, I've rigged up my checkbox control so I can go beep boop, beep boop, beep boop, beep boop. So I can check the box to make it go away. I can uncheck the box and it shows up. This happens because I have created a wonderful expression that is x equals this comp layer dot checkbox, blah, blah, blah. This line is just saying x equals this checkbox. Now, I know this because I know of checkboxes, but that means that x is going to either equal 0 or it's going to equal 1. All right, so that's just the nature of the checkbox. Right now, it equals 0. So if x, and so when you write an if then, you're saying if, and then put in brackets inside the argument brackets, what if, what is the state of, if what? So in the brackets, if x is exactly equal to 0, that's what equals mean, then make the value 100. So if what, and then do this. So if we were to simplify it, we'd put it on sort of different lines. So if papa, then papa. So if this, that. So if x is exactly equal to 0, 100. Now, the if-else is nice because it catches all the other things that would happen. So else, if, so meaning else, anything not that, if x is anything that isn't 0, then become this. So if this, that, else this. So that's how it sets up. And then you'd be like, boop, bop, beep, boop, 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 because it's 1, it's nothing. It's 1, it's nothing. Now, you could express this in a different way, right? Because we're using stuff, but we could make this 50, right? So, the checkbox is 50 or 25. So now the checkbox is like, ooh, ha, ooh, ha. It's like a ghost. Ooh, I'm a ghost. And, you can set keyframes here for your for your checkbox that are like, boop, boop, boop. So it's, ooh, oh, these should really be closer so we can actually enjoy what's happening. So it'd be go along, ooh, 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 ooh. This is not very exciting, but the idea is that, you can just adjust these numbers and then it can be whatever. So you're just setting these things up and it's doing stuff, all thanks to your checky boxy stuff, instead of having to go through and put it over here. Now, we're really substituting one thing for one other thing, but you can set up your checkboxes to control more advanced stuff. So that's sort of how that would go. And it's useful if you're, say, making a template for somebody else. You could just have the checkboxes be called something like C box, and then you can check the box on or off. Like, if you want to see this box, yes, no, whatever. So that's something you can do with the checkbox. Sliders are really just getting a numerical value in there, so you're pick whipping between them and that kind of thing. Does that help? I don't know if that is actually helpful. All right. Yeah, will this later be on the channel? Absolutely. Streams are always re-uploaded back up to the channel, or it's archived here for all time, so we can enjoy all of my whoopsies, all of my shameful things. Yeah, someone should get me some water. I'm looking at my dog in the corner, and the dog is not getting me any water. Bad Sherbert. He's really just snoring. So values in that expression represent opacity. Yes, they do. So the ones we were typing in, the 100, the 25, those are the output of the expression. And in this case, because it's on the opacity, those are that, right? So that's how that thing goes down. I'm trying to time stretch a comp with a slider control. Any ideas? All right, think design. I see your situation. Oh, someone has sent an emoji of some water, I think. We do surveys about what topics are going to go on the live streams. I try to post them up within the week leading up to the live stream, so make sure you have notifications turned on for the channel if you want to sort of have your say in there. So let's talk about time. Think design. You want to time stretch a composition with a slider control. That's pretty interesting, right? How would we do that? How might we do that, right? So think design. Here's the thought. Let's put this out there. What if we look at the time remap property, right? You add time remapping to a layer, which is probably the first step. Now, if you were to multiply the time remap property by 1, what does that mean? So that means basically it is the value that it is, right? Time remap multiplied by 1. So the slider is set to 1. That's great. What if you were to change the slider to 0.5, right? Then the value would always be half. So at 1 second, the time remap property would be at a half, or at 2, the time remap property would be at a 1. So now you're going at half speed with the slider control. You could set it up to a 2, so time remap times 2 means at 1 second you're looking at what should happen at 2 seconds. Right? So that's generally how I would do it, which I did recently because I had a project where I had this light that was like spinning around. It's like not a real light, it was like a drawing of a light, kind of like a flat design light. Anyway, it was spinning around like an alarm, and it's spinning around slowly, and then at a certain point in the animation, I need it to go faster, right? So what we would do is, does time remap function have any issues with particle generation? Not really. I don't think so. I mean, I would pre-comp and apply time remapping to the pre-composition rather than applying it to, for example, a layer with the particles on it, right? So you want to pre-compose, treat it like a movie clip, apply time remap. That's sort of an idea how to make use of that. Some friends said that stats are don't make it that. Can expressions be a trigger? Jags raison. By solid comp properties effects, long animation you want to activate that trigger. Animation in particular. Oh no. Along your animation in particular frame, you want to activate that trigger. So triggering. So Think Design, I want to just circle back to hopefully answer Think Design's thing fully here. So basically I have an animation comp that I want to be able to let another artist set the duration. Example, slider at 2, animation 2 seconds long. So you could use, again, the time remapping, right? But you have to do a little math. So if the original animation is 10 seconds long, then we would know that that a value of x would equal 10. So all you would have to do is route a little bit of math in there to say, well, now when you type in a 10, it's 10 seconds long. When you type in a 5, it's 5 seconds long. So really, that's just math, right? That's a slider control. That's time remapping and math. That's it. So that would work. All right. So triggering can be fixed by the checkbox control. Sometimes it really depends on sort of what you intend to trigger, right? So you can do a lot of good things with it really depends on what the thing is. I guess it could be anything if you're then using a comp and time remapping. So the idea that if something, then play, right? So that's kind of the idea, right? If this, then you're playing. If not this, don't play. It can get a little bit more difficult in here when you're doing things like let's say you had like a particle system, you want to do like a burst of particles every time the audio reached 100, right? So when the audio peaks in this area, poop out some particles. Those instances can be a little bit more difficult because you're linking something. It's going to pass a threshold. So if this is greater than this, then you have to do the thing and have that thing sort of sustain for a while. So that's something to do. I think that there was a great, I remember reading a great article that was about using basically, it was like the time you're at minus the in point, and it would generate, it would just like play a thing when a thing happened. I just cannot remember the great article. I rarely have to do that kind of thing myself, because in those instances I just get lazy and place some keyframes because I'm a lazy man. That's sort of how that goes. But we've got about seven or 6 minutes here. Not much time remaining. So I guess now is a good time for me to blah, blah, blah about upcoming things on the channel. I want to thank everybody for sort of coming out and jumping in the stream. Just to recap, this will be put up. This will be posted. This will be posted once it's done. And I feel a lot less like puking. Really should have eaten more for breakfast. So this will be posted once we're done talking, and it'll be up on the stream. Enjoy it for the rest of the day. Hopefully people have learned a bunch. Check out the reference. Check out the Adobe reference at adobe.com in the help file. That is actually a very useful place to just learn what a lot of these words mean and all that stuff. So that's a great thing to check out. Also, Motion Script. Someone mentioned that place. Look up Dan Eberts, double B's. So check out that guy's work if you like really want to take a deep dive. He's a genius. He also makes awesome plugins. Him and his business partner, make some interesting, cool stuff. So yeah, we'll probably talk about business stuff next time. But if you want to talk about the topics that intrigue you the most, make sure you vote. Voting is important. So make sure you vote at. Make sure you're voting at the community section on here, and then you can have your say about what we talk about next. Let's see. Yeah, we'll probably get some links. Links in the upload. Yeah, we'll probably put links when things come through. So yeah, that's about it for today. I want to thank everybody for watching. This has been great. I love that people come and get involved on the stream. Sorry I did not get around to tutorial this month. Been a busy month. I'm trying to train a new dog. Got a lot of things going on, a lot of clients. But given the high interest in expressions, maybe that's what tutorials should be about. So we'll do about that. Will I talk to Jason? No. Will I talk JSON? Maybe. We can maybe talk about those. I use body moving to poop out that stuff. So we'll get into it. And yeah, tram to fetch water. So yeah, I'm glad people are digging the streams. I'll keep doing them as long as people keep enjoying them. And thank you guys for watching. Next one will be at the end of next month. So hold your questions till then. Thank you so much. Turn on notifications for the channel. And yeah, hopefully you guys are enjoying yourselves. Thanks again for watching. And have yourselves a great day. Boop, boop, boop. And then I go to stream over. Thanks for watching. Big text.